Does good news sell? You know, I always wonder, you should have a show called Good News. Yeah, you know, the good news.
What's up, everyone? It's good to be back again. Good News Podcast coming at you right now from Langley, BC. And yeah, so we kind of wanted to have a little bit of a different setup on this one, and we wanted to have more of a conversational setup.
Mm-hmm.
So me and Graeme are just gonna talk back and forth in kind of a more conversational method.
Yeah, which, by the way, was kind of the original inception of the idea, right?
Yeah.
Of Joe Rogan, people talk to one another, and that's where they get, I think, better ideas come from that, rather than talking at a screen. Nobody really likes being talked at.
Yeah.
But yeah, hello again, just quickly jumping. It's November 25th. As per changing of the format, just a little bit, juggling things, it's going to be more, or at least we think from time to time, more conversational. Maybe thinking about changing the name, so if you guys are still with us and think you have a good suggestion for the name, something maybe a little less evangelical, biblical than good news, we're all ears. I'd like for this to be a collaborative effort. In fact, the only way it's going to be really successful, or any of our endeavors as a culture, is it's going to be cooperating.
Yeah, for sure. And now we've been kind of talking about a lot of the things that are happening around us. I think that recently, just with the whole refugee status and seeing how Canadians are kind of taking really strong opinions, we covered that last time and kind of spoke on that. Recently, I want to also mention there's been a death in the political, in the Canadian political system. There was Manmeet Bhullar, who's actually a MLA in Calgary, so member of Legislative Assembly, and he recently was trying to help somebody on the side of the road during a flurry, a snowstorm, and there was a truck that lost control and ended up hitting him. So I don't know if you heard about this, but
No, I haven't.
he was actually an amazing individual who spoke really well on some major issues around the world, like the treatment of minorities in Afghanistan, and trying to make sure that we are actually making sure the rights of those minorities are actually being taken care of in a time of turmoil right now, as far as civil warfare goes. So yeah, it was kind of a major loss in the community.
Mm-hmm.
But now a lot of attention has been brought to some of the issues that he was bringing up before he passed away. So, you know, as the people in the community there said, it was a major loss to the community. But yeah, we're going to try to kind of just learn from the things that he actually tried to bring attention to. And it's amazing to see some of the youth that are actually taking attention to, you know, issues that aren't even domestic, you know, issues that aren't even relating to their own people, but to other minorities around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just constantly you have to, you know, be aware of what's kind of happening around the world as far as human rights violations. And when you get kind of pulled into one specific one, you know, that's where I think that the media has, and we talked about this with the Paris attacks.
Yeah, we did. We talked about that during the last one. First of all, that is sad, and my heart goes out to the family. That's,
Yeah.
you know, respect. You know, it's so sad when it's already really difficult these days to do the right thing. It seems to be that way. It's if you want to make a difference, if you want to really, really help people, you either have to go through a tremendous amount of school and settle for having a leash around your neck in terms of a debt.
He was well-spoken.
He was well spoken, right? It's but otherwise there's not a lot of things available to you if you really want to help people in a lot of substantial ways.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of red tape you got to step through. There's a lot of information you got to get to, and by the end of it, if you're not completely exhausted, if you're not disillusioned by the system and just feeling unwilling and depressed, you still have even more hurdles. And for people to make it through, I do have a lot of respect, and it's sad to see someone that's already made it that far and given so much of a contribution get cut down. But we can't let ourselves get bogged down by that.
No, absolutely.
I think it's really good that you bring up that we should remember his example and start looking at the issues that he brought up, because looking outside of your borders is really important.
He actually quoted just one Sankala in his speech.
Really?
I don't know if I've told you.
You did bring him up, yeah?
Yeah, the idea that, you know, it's not about trying to change the whole world, but if you can avoid darkness from coming around you, and he spoke on the fact that
Yeah,
he really
and I was
needs light.
just going to talk about that actually, because as much as it's important to look outside of the border,
Yeah.
I think if you try to overextend yourself before doing any personal work,
Yeah.
I think you're susceptible to misinformation. I think you're susceptible to zealotry. I think you're susceptible to a lot of even spreading your own personal issues.
Yeah.
So,
No,
but I know that sounds like it walks the conservative line, and it sort of sounds a bit like, well, we got to worry about issues at home before we help other people. No, come on. We've got a lot of resources.
Yeah.
We're smart. We're capable. The shit's not going away.
Yeah.
And we, like you brought up last time, we'd like our neighbors to do this for ourselves if our house caught fire. So I think this is real. This is good. This is something we gotta have to come in right now.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Like if you look at what's happening, Trudeau, right? If marijuana gets legalized, that's a huge benefit in terms of taxes. Why don't we redirect some of that fund? We say like, well, we don't have money for refugees. Well, yeah, we do. If we legalize this, that's huge revenue.
Yeah.
That's substantially increases our ability to help, and we need to help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot of things across the board where you can actually find funding towards social services. That's something that Bernie Sanders is talking about nowadays. He had to kind of define the whole socialism thing again.
Yeah.
Because people were asking why he was labeling himself as a democratic socialist. So he has been, constantly during all of his campaigning, he's been defining and redefining and trying to establish, that socialism is not a bad word, and that a lot of the things that we have currently running in our society are socialist.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, because people get the idea like, you sort of know my idea of Bernie Sanders. I know he's champion of the people.
Yeah.
I'm also wary of a lot of the things he's done. He's not really disclosing how much of the contributions he's getting from Israel, and I think it's important to recognize that. Like that's not really okay, especially if you have the the deputy foreign minister of Israel now talking to Google and talking with YouTube and trying to make sure that inflammatory content, that's in quotations because it's still vague what inflammatory means, originating in Palestine, and using Google and YouTube to prevent that from coming out.
Where was the information saying that that Bernie Sanders was getting funding from Israel?
This actually, I believe it cropped up on Reuters or Al Jazeera.
Okay, so you might want to recheck that, because I'm pretty sure that the thing with Bernie Sanders and his campaign has been that he has not been taking big money, right? And you've said that in the previous podcast too. I do want to check that as far as a reference check on that, because it seems like Bernie was saying that he wanted to actually make his contributions kind of publicly known, and that was kind of as people were monitoring his party, his campaign kind of going, gaining steam. They were saying that you could kind of mark where his contributions were coming from, and a lot of them were coming from like the mass people that were actually supporting him. So I do implore you to check up on that, because it is something that, I mean, at the end of the day,
I remember the source being quite compelling, but yes, I will go back and check that.
Yeah,
but the thing is, like, and this is maybe just me being paranoid, but if somebody makes it to the camera, you look at Ron Paul, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was another individual that was there afloat largely due to the contributions that he had of his constituents and the people that supported him, but he got zero airtime.
Yeah. No,
whereas
absolutely.
Bernie Sanders seems to get a lot of airtime.
It wasn't even that he got zero airtime though. It was that like they were actively like saying that like that this guy isn't worthy of airtime, right?
They would never bring him up, right? Like you'd see he was like third place.
Yeah.
They'd be like, first place is this person, second place Mitt Romney, fourth place is Rick Santorum.
Even now though, if you monitor some of the things that are going on with the Democratic debates that have been happening, right after the debates and even during the debates, they have polls that are being executed to find out what the people think about who won. Yeah. And they're trying to find out for the Democratic primary at the moment, and all of these polls during, the actual debate, they always say that Bernie Sanders is ahead. And then after the polling is done, you'll see multiple websites, multiple main media websites that say that it seemed that Hillary had won. So, regardless of him,
she's getting a lot of money.
No, and regardless of him getting like media attention, majority of his media attention is from people that are like these side media corporations. Yeah. Because when he goes to actual, reporters, mainstream reporters, he doesn't respond to mainstream questions and stuff, which are generally to cause kind of ruckus.
There are questions that are designed to be to obfuscate the truth. Or,
so Bernie
he
Sanders
was given a tweaked question during a debate,
and sometimes he won't answer those. Sometimes he won't answer those. Sometimes he'll answer them, really frankly. And
because the one case in point was the one time he was given a question during the debate, which was, where do you stand? Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. Where do you stand on that? And then the same question, although it was tweaked so that she had a way out, was given to Hillary. And there was some funky business going on.
Absolutely. I mean, Bernie Sanders has a lot of people standing behind him, and there is obviously a reason to question that. If you have that many people standing behind an individual, you start to question, as you are, if there's any alternative motives, kind of. But it seems that with Bernie Sanders, if you kind of monitor his political career, a lot of people actually go on him as, saying that that's actually something that he shouldn't be proud of, the fact that he's been a career politician. He actually denies that label to start off, but if you want to speak on the idea of him being a career politician, he's been against war this whole time. He's been, pro human rights, pro a lot of rights.
Yeah, and he does have a lot of things under his belt. He's certainly got a pretty illustrious career, and I'm not denying any of these things. Yeah, I'm just wary.
No, there is reason to be wary for sure. And even right now, the Liberals that have come into power in Canada, we do have a reason to be worried with them. Yeah, but we're actually seeing action kind of come forward now. You're seeing that, like Justin Trudeau, he wrote to the Justice Minister. And we got those letters because number 6 of it is actually relating to us, right? Yeah. However, at the club, whatever, that's relating to us. However, Justin has written a lot of other things that are to be started or to be, or he wants to actually start the process for. Yeah. The one thing that he's lacking on at the moment really is this whole climate change, thing that's going to happen in Paris and establishing a lot of the new carbon control measures, and it seems that Justin wants to take Stephen Harper's original plans, and he doesn't want to make more strict plans because it seems that some of the provinces are actually very split on this. You have MPs and MLAs from provinces like Saskatchewan that are saying, listen, our province relies heavily on coal or rely heavily on certain other things that our economy, our jobs, and they're not really stating oil too much in Saskatchewan, but they're stating more like coal.
Politically, it's a dirty word. You can't really talk about that.
No, but the oil industry has definitely taken a big, a big hit from what's happened lately. Yeah. The fact that the Pipeline XL pipeline has actually been stopped. It's been completely vetoed and stuff. Obama actually spoke about it recently. The fact that it's never going to happen now, right? So that was essentially going to carry oil from Canada through the United States to the Gulf, at which point it would be distributed to Asia. So that wasn't going to be beneficial to Americans. That's something that Obama talked about. He said, it's going to make some short-term jobs, but long-term it makes something like 30. Like, it's nothing actually substantial.
No, it isn't.
So a lot of these things are kind of, we are watching the government more than before, though.
No, for sure. And you are making a really good point, and I'm reminded of something one of my political science professors said to me, was that politics in general is a bit like an old ship. Yeah. Right? So there's a lot of issues, right? You got leaks here and there. You have crew members that you don't agree with, but it's still a mechanism that can get you from A to B. Yeah. If you understand how it works. It's fallible. It's an analogy for human individuals, right? We're prone to doing the easy thing as opposed to the right thing. We're prone to doing at the end of the day, when something needs to get done, we'll do it, and we'll take the brunt of the public outcry later. Yeah. After having done what we personally feel is right, or what we can do with the information at hand. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like, you studied medicine, so you know what it's like. For instance, if you to a certain degree, if you're in a really tense situation, you have a patient that's bleeding out, you need to make a call. You have a lot of tension, and you have limited information at your disposal, and you have to act. And that's just that. And politics is not unlike that. You have politicians that know what they need to do. They're understanding of what goes on inside of the, what they understand what goes into the making of the sausage, right? Yeah. And then they have to deal with public outcry on top of that, which is good in some ways. It's good that we can come down and we actually have say, and we actually have a bit more of an understanding in real time. But even that, I can empathize with guys that are trying to make a difference according to them whether it's right for the whole is another story. Sometimes there's going to be a hiccup, and that just has to be what's taken.
Yeah.
And to have more oversight is sometimes harder for these guys. Like some people, right, when they question the idea of the validity of the Senate, I think it's really important to have fail-safes. You really need to have fail-safes. Otherwise, you have things like Bill C-51 getting run through without any scrutiny at all.
Yeah.
Granted, it got run through, and that sucks, and we need to address that. But imagine if it had gone through and we only heard about it maybe 3 months, almost a year after the fact.
Yeah, no, and that's something that happens in a lot of countries elsewhere.
Yeah.
So now that you have more attention on these major political issues, and there's other things that are receiving a lot more attention that we don't talk about a lot. The fact that there's Aboriginal women that go missing or are killed every year, right? There's been major requests into some of the cases being reopened that have been, closed because of lack of evidence or because of just BS in the past. So you have major human rights activists that are going to Justin's house on Sussex, and they're actually trying to, knock on the door and actually engage him. And Justin is answering more questions. He's opened up the ministers of, well, all the ministers. He's allowed them to be opened up to the press. So if the press emails them, they are actually open to responding back. And a lot of them are actually doing so. So it's something that Stephen Harper was against. He didn't want to do that. And Justin is now also meeting with a lot of the MPs again to discuss climate reform and to discuss some of the things that are, right at the moment need to be discussed before the Paris climate, the climate...
Call it a climate discussion.
Yeah, exactly, the climate discussion. And so before that happens, you have to have these discussions which have not been conducted since 2008 or something like that in Harper's time. So it is major things that are coming into fruition that the Liberals had mentioned in their platform. So it's obviously... there's going to be scrutiny towards things that were promised right away. The refugees, the major thing that was stated that they wanted to have, I believe, 20 or 24,000 refugees brought in from Syria by the end of the year. And they had stated that in their platform. Now they're saying that might not be a realistic goal because we're actually trying to make it so that if they come here, we can actually give them a comfortable lifestyle.
Yeah.
So
and we can take the proper measures to ensure that, that they're safe and everybody's safe and so on and so forth. And you're right.
Exactly. And obviously we want to ensure that there isn't a brunt that is taken on by the local economy either. Because then we will not be able to serve those people properly. So the idea is that we don't want to be caught without actual proper preparation. And it is obviously a time when you need to bring in these people because they have nowhere else to go. So these refugee camps are too full at the time in all of these European countries. Germany has taken in as many people as they can, which is extraordinary. Germany has really taken in so many refugees and opened up in a way that nobody expected, really. But it's on Canada because we have taken on a new role that we want to act in a way that was representative of our original Canadian standard. And now we are planning on bringing in refugees. So the number has not changed. They still want to have 20 to 24,000 brought in. They have now changed the date to a little bit further down so that we can actually allow for proper preparation. But so that's the thing, is that at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that we're actually taking care of the people that come in. And there is many different people in the community, activists. There's an activist in the Sikh community that I saw on Facebook. He wrote that they're talking with recent MPs. There's a recent campground here that's being used by the Sikh community for camps for the youth. And it has a lot of facilities for like housing. So those individuals, the activists, have been speaking to local MPs to actually provide them with some temporary housing, and that's huge. That's something that was humbling for me to hear. So to see people taking these measures nowadays is great. And we really want to keep encouraging it, because in the end, I don't know if I actually had mentioned that to you, right? That was from the Sikh community, the fact that they'd done that. And it's like, we have the ability to actually go and possibly serve Syrian refugees. So now it's something that I'm really trying to keep in my constant attention, that it's not our point to what's it called? Justify our hypocrisy. We're supposed to acknowledge our hypocrisy,
acknowledge our mistakes,
and then actually
use them to inform the solutions that we enact later. And I think that's a beautiful idea. I think, especially for, well, let's take someone like me. If you were to listen to earlier podcasts, I think it's very easy to point to me and say, like, that's liberal, he's too idealistic. But when it comes to something like this is a very real issue, and you need to be pragmatic about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing that this is occurring.
Yeah.
For instance, you can see the discussion is slowly changing on campuses over at UFE out in the valley. You actually have someone started an Arab club, and the nature of the club is to sort of give people a very clear picture about what you're dealing with. This is what the ideology says. This is what you're dealing with. Clarifying the issues so that there's no Islamophobia.
Yeah.
And alternatively, you don't have that whole social justice insanity on the other side, calling anybody a racist or looking into people that want to be practical about the discussion and trying to paint them, in the opposite light.
Yeah, no, the idea of blaming all Muslims for ISIS.
Yeah.
They say it's like relating it to
and there's still
Nickelback, right?
Yeah, 100%. And there's still people that want to be on completely the opposite spectrum that will accuse you of being racist if you're not overly relativistic about it.
Yeah.
Right?
No, and not necessarily being racist, but they're saying that you're being overly politically correct or something like that. And there's a lot of stuff that's being said about our generation in that sense that we're too overly politically correct. I understand that
we're tolerant of a lot of people, but that's kind of gets skewed a little bit. And I think a lot of the stats come from the United States and saying that we're more tolerant to homosexuals, to transgender, to a lot of different cultures, but it's also true that we kind of like these people a little more. We're very intolerant of intolerance. Yeah. If we even vaguely suspect, if we so much as smell that somebody has maybe an older worldview, we can easily misrepresent and jump on it. That's a hallmark of our generation.
And that's, again, we're talking from Canadian youth, right? We're not representing all North American youth or anything. This is youth in Canada that, to be honest, it seems to be a lot more opened up people within our small populace. But
it's also true that I think that's indicative, or at least as far as I can tell, that's indicative of a lot of things becoming trendy. It's trendy to be accepting. It's trendy to be
exactly. So
and that's not well informed. It's just people following the herd mentality and saying, oh, well, it's socially safe to do this.
Yeah,
it's socially safe, and if not, you're encouraged to be offended by certain things.
Yeah. And
the people that turn out to be the most outspoken in terms of social justice are the ones that are usually the least informed about a lot of the issues.
Yeah.
They're the first ones willing to speak. Yeah. Well, of course you're going to be willing to speak. You or I would be willing to speak if the issue was so black and white. But when you just sit down and you do the research as you have in terms of what Canada is doing for refugees, you're not so quick to jump up on a soapbox and start shaming people because it's gray. It's very gray.
Yeah. And
what wrong is more right?
The idea is that people are shaming people right away. They're saying, we're not making these original numbers that we had established right now. So they're saying that Canada is, is flip-flopping.
Yeah.
But it's like, honestly, I want to give the politicians for one second here, because we've just had the elections happen, right? And on the latter end of it now, we have major things that are happening. We've talked about a few major issues that have actually been brought forward, and those all need legislation. They all need
legislation, and we're sort of slow to acknowledge that maybe the last party did leave a lot of booby traps. You know what I mean?
They messed up a lot of
sabotage.
Stuff. Exactly.
For sabotage. For the they're just getting a jump on the next election. So they shoot the current party in the foot, the one that just got elected, and they say, "Well, look what they did," right? Easy. It's just part of the political game, right?
Yeah,
but we haven't really talked about that.
That propaganda stuff is getting so old, and it's getting
and it's nice to see a lot of people. I go to friends' houses, and I'm actually so thankful that any commercial will come on, and it's just this is unbelievable. This is ridiculous. This is how stupid they think we are.
No,
yeah,
sure. But again, we're in Canada. We do talk from a point of privilege because it seems
totally
because we have. And my friend was actually
dangerous bit.
Yeah, my friend was telling me it's a kind of a simple understanding of why it is that people up here are stereotyped as being so polite. He said it just speaks on the fact that we used to be small communities. We used to be kind of close-knit communities that didn't have necessarily a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the winters, the weather was always harsh. So if you have harsh weather, you kind of have to be close as a community to take care of each other.
Yeah.
So that idea of politeness kind of extended from that.
Yeah.
So now we do have immigration that's kind of happening a lot within the last 40 years, within the last 50 years. But now our communities are getting some population density for sure, but those original standards are still being promoted within Canadians. We had a lot of bad representation for a while. So now that our representation is liberal. It is democratic. It is very, left wing. It is not very right wing at all.
Yeah.
We as people can actually do a lot. You can go and speak to the defense minister, right? You can go downtown. He lives in Vancouver.
Yeah.
So it's like you can speak to a lot of the people directly, and you can email people directly.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make. If there's someone you look up to, like,
you spoke on that. The fucking Noam Chomsky replied back to you, but you never got a reply from your MLA.
Not my local.
So
my local
so
MP.
now let's test that out.
Yeah.
Now let's test that out.
Yeah.
Right? You and by all means, the fact that you actually did that, most people don't actually make that effort.
Yeah.
But it's like they should be accessible to us.
Yeah.
They should. We're supposed to be, represented by these people.
Yeah.
And if there's people like you not going out there and actually talking, you're obviously well informed about a lot of the global issues around the world, and some of the domestic issues more so than myself. And you're more well spoken, so it's like people, when you go out there, you have to be willing to actually. And this isn't just Graeme that I'm extending this to. It's the rest of the listeners too, because it's like we have this need for people that are actually clear speaking about the topic and actually have an ability to get their point across.
Because you're right, we do have a lot of paralyzed intellectuals, and we have a lot of ready to speak people that are not taking the time to look at what they're speaking on.
Yeah. And you're more well spoken than I am, right?
Nah,
so I have a tendency to use certain words, certain ways of talking.
Colloquialisms.
Yeah, so it's about actually developing your speech. Definitely, you have to be taken seriously by the people that you're talking to.
But I mean, yes, I agree with you, because honestly, what we've just spoken about, you and I just brought up the whole like left ring, white ring issue, right?
Yeah.
And like bipartisan politics aside, there's a part of us that knows like that's just people think.
Yeah.
That's evolutionary herd mentality to create a sort of one of the best mechanisms to get what everybody needs. It's slow. It doesn't actually speak to the true individual human spirit. We know that there's an extrication from that, and the truth is beyond it. But this is sort of the gross mechanism, just like the body's sort of the gross mechanism of something higher. So we sort of recognize that, but you and I still perform a bit of double speak and try to address that.
No, and I mean, it's an extrapolation of the debate is essentially what it is, right? That's why you have a bipartisan system, is that you have one party that is conservative and one party that is highly liberal, and then you have them duking it out. So if one party is very adamantly on one side of the topic and one is on the other side, you can kind of figure out.
It's true. Like this is a practical, pragmatic mechanism, but it's also
it doesn't work.
No, because you got to recognize that in terms of propaganda, that is not limited to like petty commercials. Propaganda extends way beyond. Propaganda is designed to inform the political class and to keep them jogging on a similar treadmill. It goes all the way up to the highly, highly, highly intelligent.
Yeah.
Only people that actually adopt even an element of faith, I hesitate to use the term because that can be taken out of context, but have an element of faith to recognize that there's something beyond that, come to know that, okay, there is an effort to inform people that things operate within a specific set of parameters when the reality is beyond that. It's removed from that. This notion, for instance, somebody brought up recently that kind of shook people, this idea that we should eliminate international borders. Okay, that speaks more to what we can actually do. We can operate in small communities. We can thrive if we communicate as a people to other people. Because when conflicts arise, it's because representatives put words in the mouths of people and address other people.
Well, I mean, already we don't necessarily have people abiding by the lines, and it's like we always say the word Iraq all the time, but the word Iraq is not really valid. To say Iraq, you have to actually say the Sunnis in the north, the Shiites in the like the south, and it's like there's such a territorial kind of representation.
Do you know how rich the history is? Do you know what you're actually paving over?
No, for sure, and that's and I'm just saying.
I'm not suggesting you. I'm not saying.
No, I'm saying the actual point on the ground, like what's happening right now. A lot of people aren't aware that it's not as simple as we think it is. There's been conflicts that have been around for ages. So it's like for us to go in there and expect an outcome. It's not really that reasonable for us to expect.
No, it's a bit like this whole Somali pirate thing. I mean, they talked about it on Joe Rogan, and that's where we get a lot of information. But like, it's not so clear. It's not so justified. Listen, a lot of the people that have apparently joined ISIS, this shadow organization now, people that were growing up in Iraq and Afghanistan when they were 14 years old, this is when the invasion occurred, and they're living under that. This informs a lot of hate.
Yeah.
Understand that it's not entirely unjustified. Even before that, their father, the area he was living was decimated. You had Britain coming in over 100 years ago, and then you had Russia coming in for the Cold War during the clash between the United States and Russia.
No, yeah, and that's what.
And
but like, we get pissed off.
Infrastructure is completely decimated.
Yeah, but we
and
get pissed off when there's like locally bred Canadian terrorists, people from Calgary and people from Toronto or New York and stuff, because it's like your standard of living here is not comparable to there. But it seems like what they're saying is that they somehow got that connection to those people's plight. But it's like here in Canada, we can help the world, but you don't do it by joining this power struggle back and forth. It's just going to cause more turmoil.
Yeah.
And it seems like, again, what people are trying to bring this climax to is this whole holy war thing.
Yeah.
And Joel was talking about this on a recent podcast, just stating that really is kind of like a basic understanding of what's kind of going on at the moment, is that people are kind of trying to set up for the rapture.
Yeah.
They're trying to set up for the holy war.
Yeah, and I really think I would really like to get more of Rupert Sheldrake's position on this. If for those of you who don't know Rupert Sheldrake, very well-spoken scientist. He looks at things like the morphogenetic field, what informs the consciousness of an organism, how is information being transmitted amongst organisms, how does a group of monkeys on one island learn to wash their yams in the ocean, and with zero physical contact, another group of monkeys on another island learn to do that at exactly the same time. How is the information transmitted? How does it work with human beings?
Yeah.
Why has the speed of light changed consistently around the world between groups at almost exactly the same time?
Yeah.
What's in operation there, and what does this mean? Because I get the sensation when it comes to this notion of the holy war, human beings, a lot of us are beginning to feel like we're living on borrowed time. Look at all the shit that happened. Look at the rise of technology. Looking at the political developments, looking at the fact that people have disregarded current legislation in their own countries and decided that the drug war is a sham and have thus changed it on their own. Look at all these things and what that's leading to. And is it possible that we are all well aware that there's something that this is pointing to? You know, well, people call it a techno-apocalypse, what have you. Is there something that's informing this that's beyond the news? Is there something that's inherent within us that we're transmitting to one another that really comes down to the real issue? We're all afraid. We all act insane when we're afraid.
Yeah.
But what's lost in translation, I think, is a common connection. We're all afraid of the same idea. What's going to happen? Who judges us? I'm not talking about a religious notion, but there are questions inherent to human beings that we feel beg our attention, and that goes on in our own secret lives, the full-time job up here. And I think the way things look scary. One, they're peaceful, but we have an awareness of things that we didn't before. And so I think this sort of end times notion has been in a lot of people's minds, right? Things look scary. People get more afraid even though there might be less conflict. People now have to take more responsibility. And sort of the whole human organism is beginning to... It's beginning to be born.
Yeah.
It's a shape.
Have you seen the ant colony video recently?
No, I didn't.
So
I
there's
heard
this
about it,
video where they poured cement into this ant colony that they'd kind of seen. This massive mounds were set up, just in the ideal setting for an ant colony to kind of be
Flourish.
set up on this farm.
Yeah.
So they poured cement into the holes, and it took a lot of cement. Then they let the cement set, and then they dug around it. And to see the size of this ant colony and the structure they had made, the functional abilities of the structure, and carrying noxious airs out of the structure through these kind of vents that they had set up.
Really?
And it's like the amount of dirt that every individual ant had to carry up such a long distance, which is equivalent to like 1.8 kilometers basically for each ant in human distance, and they were carrying this massive dirt loads, each ant. And they did this in such a drastically fast time. So they related this monumental, massive, accomplishment as being basically relatable to having made to the Great Wall of China. And it was just made in this small area.
Yeah.
So these ants were acting as a superorganism and were actually able to construct and think as a superorganism. So we also have flocks of birds that, when they're able to fly around in millions of numbers in New Zealand and Australia, these specific flocks of birds, they can actually look all over the landscape. So they act as one massive superorganism, and they're able to find different things that they're looking for.
Yeah.
And I watched a video on this, and it's just, you see the
Staggering.
capacity for
Yeah.
the animals that we consider to be lower than us.
Incidentally, the ants that learn to fly are those that come from a colony that has actually achieved a kind of an equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
They've achieved what they need. Okay, food's taken care of. We're consistently managing in spite of the changes in seasons and so on. Some begin to take flight. It's a lot like human beings. We're at that stage now, but that's incredibly interesting.
Yeah, so again, it speaks to the similarities that are actually there, even though we try to bring more light to the differences or the contrasts.
Yeah.
But there's this ability for us to actually
Yeah.
kind of relate to things like dolphins. Dolphins
Yeah.
have accents. We talked about this. They have regional dialects.
This
So
is
it's
something you
extraordinary.
come into contact, like if you ever choose to access altered states, I'm not talking about drugs specifically, you can do this with things like Kundalini Yoga, you can do this things like Kriya Yoga.
Flotation tanks.
Flotation tanks. There's so many things you can do. Even change your diet. Even if you go on something they call it a dieta. So, for instance, the vegetalistas, these are people that practice using plant medicines and adopting plant teachers, will clean their diet and they will allow one plant to take root within themselves.
Yeah.
Not literally, but they'll include a diet. Let's say white rose into their diet.
Yeah.
The white rose too is a teacher. And you can meditate, but even without that, we all have a bridge, an access point to an altered state. And you can change your perspective drastically without chemicals. But, for me, for ayahuasca, I know what you're saying because, and this is speaking only from personal experience and everyone has to take their own journey. But for me personally, it wasn't until I interacted with this particular teacher, which I will refer to as ayahuasca, I was able with her to feel that common connection.
Yeah, and you should do a podcast just speaking about your experiences of ayahuasca.
Yeah.
I think that would be
I think
really
it might be beneficial from people.
Yeah, and people out there are really scared about ayahuasca and scared about the concept of ayahuasca or DMT. And obviously your experiences are not going to necessarily dispel those fears.
Well, I think, you're right. Maybe give it a little bit of perspective because, for one, that's kind of the nature of the work that you're doing. But really to understand fear is just a membrane that you have to pass through if you're going to grow, right? Every time you feel afraid, that tiny circle of your comfort zone expands a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, you can stay in there. That is entirely in your prerogative. But when you get tired of that, you have to face this. It's quite an impersonal mechanism that you're facing. Fear is just the gate you're passing through. And on the other side is what you're using to expand yourself with. So when it comes to when we're very young, we experience trauma, and as a result, we're not trained. We don't have the wherewithal to defend necessarily. So when we experience a trauma, we cling to something. We can't quite face it fully, so we cling to something. We choose a piece of our identity. We adopt something that we make into ourselves. We fashion a mask from what we can find. And that now protects us from that initial pain. But what ayahuasca does for us is she shows us how to break that mask and to fully experience what it was we were afraid of, what hurt us. And in so doing, we grow. And we never have to go back to that experience. And for some, myself included, these are so damaging, these traumas, that it affects daily life.
Yeah.
I am a substantially different person because I went in and faced a lot of abuse that I experienced growing up. And you're right, it is scary, but frankly, there's no safer environment.
It's interesting because Steve Jobs said, in hindsight, that having tried LSD in college was one of the most valuable experiences in his life. We don't always use just Steve Jobs as obviously the best example. He had a lot of strange practices as far as his business ethics went. Yeah. But it's the fact that
he never let his kids use an iPad for an extended period of time.
But to ask you though, he said that said that LSD was a valuable part in his life, and that he actually went on to say that every individual should try LSD.
Yeah,
at least once in your life.
Yeah.
So then the question to you is, would you say the same about ayahuasca?
The thing is, it's highly, highly personal, and frankly, if you don't need to, then so much the better. There's other things you can do, but frankly, here's why I went to her. So in my last ceremony, I went in, and she was quite gentle with me, and ayahuasca said, "Okay, you're only gonna go in as far as you allow yourself to." Yeah. Okay, so despite it being absolutely terrifying for me to go into that place, because it's quite unpredictable.
Yeah.
What you're experiencing, she'll always give you what you can handle. She will never give you something you can't handle.
Amber Lyon talks about this too, right?
Yeah, right. So she won't give you something you can't handle. You might be terrified, you might run out of the place, but you're not going to die. You're not going to lose your mind. You can go to some pretty far out places and it can be pretty hard on you, but that is also up to you. You always have a choice. You can always give in to fear, or you can manage.
Yeah, no, I mean...
And it's not easy, but...
As I was stating, like, Amber Lyon said it, and she was kind of just like a reporter that was not really at all associated to psychedelics or psychotropic
and
chemicals.
you're talking to me too, right? I'm a middle-class white guy.
No, but I mean, like, we have a little bit of experience as what we would consider psynauts, right? Just having done psychonauts, anyways, a Freudian slip of sorts. But we have a little bit of experience in that sense. However, if you see people like the individual that was from Days of Our Lives, that guy may not have had, he may have had exposure to, like, conventional stuff, but if you separate the idea of somebody who has exposure to psychedelics, would you suggest it to somebody who, let's say, doesn't do any recreational drugs, maybe drinks from time to time, but wants to have like a perspective change?
Well, let me finish that first point I was making. She said I would only go in as far as I wanted to, and I went to her for this reason, because as far as I was able to go, I went in pretty deep and I was able to purge some things, but I wasn't able to go so far in that I got to the root of some problems. I dealt with some of the things that had been building for a while. I chopped the top off a lot of stuff, but I wasn't able to go to the underlying cause and eliminate it. So she told me at this point, after I was able to purge, and I came back and I sort of sat with her and just talked as a dialogue. It's telepathic. Again, grain of salt if you're not familiar with that sort of territory. She said that's why you work with me, because I can push you through the places that you're not able to do on your own. That's why you come to a teacher.
Yeah, but again, you're saying, like, to not do, ayahuasca to the average individual, but the average individual has not necessarily had their perception or their consciousness kind of opened up.
No, you're right, and so that's why there's a lot of prerequisites. For instance,
I'm saying that doesn't need to be a prerequisite. Like,
no, but just being able to be open with yourself and recognize, okay, like, am I okay with the way things are now?
Yeah.
Do I need to do work? Okay, first, that means that now you're open to the idea that you might be willing to first look at yourself, and two, that means, okay, you might be willing to take steps to address an issue should you find one. There's more than that you have to do, but it also comes down to how drastic you're willing to get in terms of it. So ayahuasca is beautiful. It's amazing. The most amazing thing I've ever experienced. Yeah, it's terrifying for sure. Don't go into it with this naivety that it's going to be all sunshine and puppies and rainbows, because you're going to get your ass kicked. And I got my ass kicked, and I was still trying to be... I still went into it with a lot of respect, but it's having dealt with it, I'll never regret it. But certainly, you need to really question yourself. If you don't have a meditative practice in your life, I would strongly recommend that you take one on. Maybe go on a Vipassana retreat. Try to incorporate meditation into your day. Try to incorporate things like Kriya Yoga.
See, Vipassana,
take steps.
No, but Vipassana, again, is not like a step, right? Like, that's a big step.
That's a big step, so, right? Like, but if you're already doing meditation, good idea.
No, but the thing is, like, I wanna say this as making it ayahuasca, like, and people have been asking me a lot lately. They've been saying that, can I get access to ayahuasca? Do you know where ayahuasca can be purchased? And what I've been stating is that people need to be around to actually help you, to be a shaman, to actually administer the ayahuasca. I agree with that, right? However, this idea that now it seems like we're actually bringing this inaccessibility to ayahuasca, and I seem to have had it actually infiltrate my language in the way that I present ayahuasca to people too. So now my kind of point that I want to not necessarily establish as being, I wanted to bring it into debate is it okay for the average individual who has not had access or has not had experience with psychedelics, because I mean, to be honest, I don't think we can judge. I don't think
that's the thing, right? It's really up to the individual. Yes, if it's done properly, if you can find the right people. The thing is, man, ayahuasca will find you. That's what she said to me the first day. She said, I've been working with you
Mm-hmm.
since long before you drank the medicine.
Yeah.
Long before that. So yes and no. But if you are doing it, I would, like, what I did, it took me a good 5 years. I pursued conventional therapy.
Yeah.
I pursued my own sort of meditative practice, which I did for a number of years. Became a vegetarian. Became very open to examining different philosophical, spiritual, religious traditions, and looking at the way that they address trauma in the idea of having PTSD.
Yeah.
How do different cultures address this? How do different medical practitioners practice and address these issues? What is the organization of MAPS? What are they up to? That's the Organization for Psychedelic Studies, and examining what works for them. I had a very graduated process, and ayahuasca was at the top of that, because it's something that you need to consider, because you will inevitably face some of your greatest fears. For me, the first one was you go through death, and then you go through what's at the root of, say, an eating disorder, of a depression, of your anger. You'll find the source of these things there, and you have to just mentally prepare yourself to go to that place.
Yeah.
Because it can shake you. It shook me. I was as prepared as I thought I could be, and even then, it really, really took me.
Yeah.
It really took me hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember some parts of it being like, I just thought, I make this stop, whatever it is, make it stop for 6 hours.
Yeah, I mean,
so you have to be prepared.
You have to be prepared, right? But I kind of want to bring the idea to like this light, the fact that we don't have much of a viewership at the moment, right? We don't have a lot of people watching, but you're pretty much the only.
We should just have one girl to sit like in the background, man.
No, but I'm just saying, you're pretty much the only person in BC at the moment who's talking about ayahuasca, who's promoting ayahuasca or talking about ayahuasca, because there isn't necessarily a lot of people that are doing podcasts. There is some podcasts, there's Pod TV, there's a lot of other ones that are kind of progressive and talking about different things.
Mm-hmm.
There's more blogs and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But nowadays, like, if there is going to be representation for the ayahuasca community, I think that accessibility is a big thing that people always struggle with. And from hearing your experience, that people have gone there and they've done ayahuasca, thousands of times, right? They've
that's
actually
like that like shamans have done it like maybe 1,000 times, like hundreds of times,
or hundreds of
like
times.
individuals. Like I met people there that had done it 30 and 40 times,
Yeah.
which to me is staggering.
Which is staggering.
Like I had
right?
6 nights, and I'm like,
yeah, so
I'm gonna take a breather for a while.
That's the thing, is that like then people actually did do this, repetitively,
Yeah.
right? So it's every person's life is so individually different.
Yeah.
We don't even know if there's necessarily as much bats in your cave, or maybe the bats are deeper in your cave. We don't necessarily know. So
That's just
really,
it, yeah.
Yeah, so it's
just be
anecdotal.
real with yourself. Be
Yeah.
honest with yourself, and you have to be open with these ideas, and you have to recognize that things can always get better.
But you would be a great person to actually go out and talk to people about this. The fact that ayahuasca can actually bring forward change in a lot of things, like PTSD and stuff.
And I think that,
right?
and I would like to promote, frankly, without the mechanisms aside, whatever you're using, what I really like to promote is wellness, is acceptance of self.
Yeah.
I'm working on that journey myself, but I know that as a whole, we need to come to terms with our demons, so that I can take your hand in friendship and I'm not grasping a fist. Yeah. I'd love for that to be the case.
No, definitely.
And that's really what I'm promoting. But if ayahuasca is a mechanism for that, the reason why I'm not so I don't relish the idea of fully promoting that and saying it's accessible, this is how you go through it.
Yeah.
It's still working its way into the society, and I think it needs to ease its way in, because this is going to be very foreign to a lot of mindsets that we have now.
For sure.
So do your homework, please, for your benefit, for the benefit of the community. Do your homework on something like this. It's very effective if you are willing and you are committed to it, but it does require a commitment, because you are going to experience 4 to 6 hours of tumbling through yourself.
Yeah.
Now, if you are not mentally prepared, you can have a hard time. I had a hard time. I had a really hard time. Yeah. I was grinding my face, my legs, my arms into gravel, because any pain was enough to take me away from the place I was at. I got through it, but that's the way that I was managing to do it. Because it's easy to forget where you are, and it's easy to forget that you have a choice of whether to use whatever's given to you and be grateful for it, and be grateful for the healing, or to give in to fear and run.
Yeah.
So those are possible things. that happened for me personally.
Yeah.
There's other things that have happened to other people, and if you don't do your homework, you can go to an improper shaman. What's his name? Aubrey Marcus was discussing this recently with Duncan Trussell. You have to do your homework because you need a white shaman, right? Now, I don't say white as in white skin. I mean someone who is well-intentioned and well-trained and knows what they're doing and knows what to avoid. See, there are people in the gray, and people in the gray maybe want to keep you just sick enough that you keep coming back to them. And then there are black magicians, right? There are people that have bad intentions, and ultimately things are going to go sideways for you if you go that route. There's a lot of things you need to be aware of. It's something that's just an ancient tradition, and it's meant to be respectful. There's a lot of issues today, and so it's diffusing necessarily to get to these parts, but it needs to ease into it, and
Definitely.
people need to take steps into
No, definitely. And I'm not necessarily saying that you should jump into ayahuasca.
But bringing it into the discussion.
Yeah, and my understanding is that if somebody has heard the word ayahuasca, nowadays there's a great deal of influence that comes from Joe's podcast. It extends beyond that. Some people know about Graham Hancock, but they've never heard about Joe's podcast. Yeah. So it seems that it's extending out to really a lot of different people in a lot of different circles. So you have this idea of ancient plant medicines really being reintroduced. Yeah. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see within the next 20 years. Like you said, it's going to take a while for us to gradually kind of integrate these plant medicines back into our society. Yeah. But I think that at the moment, especially with people like, people that are suffering from PTSD, people that are veterans, that actually need a lot of care and a lot of help in this regard. These things could be beneficial. Things like Ibogaine too, and we're hearing about there is underground clinics that are going on in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah. So we are a lot more progressive here than most areas for sure already. But even
in South Surrey, if you live nearby, even in South Surrey, there's an Iboga clinic. But
I didn't know that.
You actually make a really, really good point, because a lot of our attention goes to people that we look at, veterans, for instance. Yeah. We look at homeless people. We look at
Carlin said that, right?
Yeah, right. We look at very there's archetypal figures that we refer to as being needing psychiatric help. You name it, and addressing the mental health issues. We usually look to a certain few groups. I also want to learn or get us to expand our appraisal of who needs mental health and include the general population, because there's a lot of people. I mean, for instance, myself, like I'll be perfectly frank, I've interacted with psilocybin mushrooms. That has been tremendous for me.
I did ago.
I didn't realize how sick I was until I was introduced to psilocybin.
Absolutely.
And I realized, I thought, holy shit, this is how you can feel? And I've been here the whole time.
And that's what my friends say all the time is, why can't I think like this when I'm sober?
And people initially thought, oh, that's making your brain bleed. No, a lot of what you're experiencing is actually hyperconnectivity of the brain. So when you're hallucinating, quote unquote, you're seeing more of what's actually there. Yeah. And maybe it's amorphous and maybe you're hallucinating, but that's because what you're seeing is really based on your perception. And if your perception is split, if you're seeing an expanded perception, then what you're getting is multiple views of reality at once. And this is why it appears to be, I don't know, you got babies coming out of your ceiling, or you got, I'm not saying that's actually the case, but one time I did actually manage to see what looked like marble statues of people arm in arm reaching towards the light in the center of the ceiling that was slowly turning to skeletons. And that's kind of just what my mind decided to make it, but I was also well aware that information was being fed into a computer, being my mind, and that I was sort of manipulating what it was, the information coming in, tweaking the light. This is reflected light, that's what we're all seeing, right? But that, all that aside, that's just the being open to seeing in yourself that there's something that needs to be changed, that things can always be improved. Yeah, we've established a comfort zone, and it's nice that as a whole, as a human species, we finally had a bit of a breather, rather than, constantly on the run, constantly engaged in warfare, constantly struggling to get by. Yeah. We have finally a bit of a breather, so that's great, but we can't rest on our laurels and say, this is fine, I'm fine, it's them that need to get fixed. No, be open to examining yourself. Be skeptical, be open. If I could spiel and talk at people, which I don't like doing, that would probably have to be the theme, because it's really, life does not get better until we actually decide to pull our work pants on and say, all right, listen, we got to be gentle with ourselves, and we got to recognize that work needs to be done. Yeah. We can't just cherry pick the information that we're given. We got to take steps. I know it's fucking hard when you get off work. and you just spend 5 days, 4 days, 6, 7 days working just to pay bills and to take care of your family. I know the last thing you want to do is sit down and examine what the world's problems are, what your problems are. You don't have time, you don't have money. I know, I get it. And I think it's really important. I wish we could establish support groups. But frankly, if you're viewing this and there is something like that, please feel free to contact us. We have a YouTube channel. We have a Twitter account. Just tweet us. Just leave a comments under here, and we'd be happy to address it. If you're open to bringing up an issue, we're more than happy to help you.
Yeah,
we can at least try.
At the end of the day, we try to facilitate even some minor psychedelic trips here, because we think that it is something that is beneficial for our friend circle, and that's all that we've seen from it. So if we can, kind of facilitate that for other people, even in smaller regards, something like psilocybin mushroom.
Yeah.
I just had an experience with my friend the other day, and we tried to write down as much of our thoughts as we could.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a constant learning curve, and we're gonna keep going.
And this is not exclusively. This is certainly not done as a recreational thing. We need to get away from the idea that this is just hippie feel good time, and that this is we're just trying to get people to feel themselves, man. We're not looking to introduce people to a cosmic consciousness. All we're trying to do is extend into the rational domain of human beings who are trying to get by to create a better standard of living as a whole.
Yeah.
Very rational, very reasonable. We're simply trying to include in that something that can give you a greater perspective on the issues, give you a greater perspective on yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, if you guys can open yourselves up to these things, we're just going to keep, the discussion going back and forth.
Yeah,
so,
we'll try.
Guys, thanks for tuning in again. This has been a Wicked podcast. We hope to keep these coming at you guys every week. That's our goal now. Me and Graeme kind of just texted back and forth saying that we're going to try to make this a more regular thing for our viewers, and so that we're actually covering topics with a more scheduled kind of approach. So thanks for tuning in, everybody, and if you have anything else to say.
No, other than I love you guys. I wish you all the very best. Any comments at all, haters, criticisms, you name it. I hope you guys are well during this cold months. Please, all the very best. Hope this has helped. If not, please leave a criticism. We'd be happy to learn. Anyways, take care, guys. All the very best.
Peace and love.